Hi everyone, so from the title of this video, I'm sure you can assume that today I'll be talking about myself, how I came to live in France as an American expat, and how I managed to switch careers from working in the fashion industry to working in the wine industry. If that's something that interests you, I hope you keep watching. Thanks. So let me first try to give a very brief introduction about myself. I am a 20-something-year-old American expat living in Paris, France. I was born in California, but I was raised between California and Florida my whole life and managed to move back and forth a few times until I ended up graduating high school in Florida. After that, I went to college in Ohio for fashion merchandising, and that's kind of like where unknowingly I kind of like started to have a really big love for like wine, beer, and spirits, but I at the time like just really didn't know. So I befriended someone who is now like my best friend, and she was really into craft beer, and so she introduced me to it. She started teaching me a lot, and her and I would end up spending most of our time at tap rooms and beer halls. And then after that, she introduced me to a lot of new liquor that I didn't know before. And so really my previous knowledge of liquor was bare minimum and like the college version at best. And then after that came liquor. And I remember I was like Googling some kind of ingredient. I don't remember what, but I was Googling something and I came across like Hendrick's gin, and that sounded really interesting. And I asked my friend, who was like 21 at the time, I think I was 20, and I asked her if she could go to the liquor store and buy the bottle. And she was like, yeah, of course I will. And so she went, she came back, and we ended up making so she comes back with the bottle, and what we made was like a gin and tonic. Obviously, it's like the easiest thing you could do with gin. We Googled like what's like the easiest mixed drink you could do. It was like gin and tonic. And I remember like at that point I had said like, wow, where was gin all of my life? I immediately just like fell in love. I have to like find other really amazing liquors that are just as amazing. And I mean, I tried everything. I was like drinking whiskey and bourbon and rye and all kinds of vodka. And I wasn't drinking this at parties to get drunk. Like we never went to college parties. I mean, we would literally like stay home and like try to make like mixed drinks of our own because we just like started to fall in love with this. And at some point we like would drive 45 minutes away to Cleveland to go have dinner at like a cocktail bar and restaurant so we could like drink cocktails because we just were really in love with mixed drinks. So now you're probably wondering like, okay, like where does wine come in all of this? And that didn't really start, my love for wine didn't really start until like later in life when I graduated college and I moved to New York. But I did grow up with parents who loved to drink wine for dinner. And so it was super normal for me to like have a few sips of wine and try and all of that. They never like really said no. And I liked wine, but it was never like something that I grew a big love for, like how I did for beer and for spirits. But either way, anyways, so I ended up graduating college in 2014 with a bachelor's of fashion merchandising, and I moved to New York to basically pursue a career in that. And I had internships in PR and in social media with like really big name designer brands, and it was going well. So when I first moved to New York, my first place was in a room rental where I shared a room with like a middle-aged like vegan woman. And I remember once in conversation, she brought up the wine shop that was like across the block from us. She had said something along the lines of like, it's not good, I wouldn't go. I went once and it was like really weird wines. And so like, it never, I mean, that like never really intrigued me to go. So I was like, okay, I won't go. And I never really thought about it after that. And in New York, like I kept going to cocktail bars. I mean, if you know, like New York's cocktail scene is just like incredible. And the places that you could go to enjoy like mixed drinks is just like amazing. And like the places themselves have like the most awesome, like it has the most awesome ambiance. And so I kind of was doing that in New York. And I was still drinking a lot of beer, but not wine. And I remember by my grocery store that I would go to, there was a small wine shop on the corner. And I remember always going in and trying to see if I would recognize something. And I never did. I mean, at that point, I knew nothing about wine. And like, you couldn't give me 2 bottles because like I would not know the difference between it at all. I mean, I knew that one was a red and one was a white. And I never left the store without anything because I was always super overwhelmed. And so I like never bought anything. But anyways, like fast forward a year, I was reading an article and it was talking about natural wine and I had no idea what that was. And if you're watching this and you don't know what natural wine is, it's basically wine that's farmed organically or biodynamically with a little to no sulfites added and no alterations in the cellar. So it's basically like wine at its purest form. And just like this idea to me kind of like opened my eyes and broadened my views on wine and spirits. I never thought about wine in that sense, you know, a product that like really could cover like geography, history, and politics, because it really does. It's an agricultural product. And I think that's something that like people tend to forget about it because I see it on the shelf and it's like in this pretty little bottle. But I mean, like so much encompasses. And I think like we tend to forget that. But at that point, like something like clicked with me and it became almost like an obsession where I had to learn more and more and more. And honestly, at that point, I stopped going to like any cocktail bar or any kind of beer hall. And I only started to drink wine. Because I mean, the only ways you're going to learn is by drinking wine and by reading. And that's exactly what I did. I bought a bunch of books and I read and I drank. And then, you know, funny enough, when I started Googling on really well-known wine shops with incredible selections, it was like the wine shop that my old roommate had mentioned that like was across the street, which is funny because now that I know about that place, it's like kind of crazy because it's like has one of the best wine selections like in New York City. And at that time, like, you know, I had no idea about wine or natural wine. And I was like, okay, like I'll never go in because the wine was weird according to my roommate. But I mean, now that I know, like the wine is absolutely incredible. So at this point, I'm drinking a lot of wine. I'm learning a lot. I'm going to all the wine bars. And at this point in my career, I'm working as a creative project manager for a big brand. And I really loved what I was doing and I absolutely loved my team. I just didn't love the industry. And I went to school to be a buyer because that's like what I thought I wanted to do. And I had been doing that for about 3 years. And before that, I was working in PR and social media for different designer brands. And I honestly started to feel kind of empty. The fact that I was like selling clothing or trying to push clothing that was expensive, that was like made overseas in like horrible factories. And the whole thing just like started to feel like very vapid. And of course it's like not the whole industry. By all means, there's like amazing companies that are doing like really great job at being like doing a really great job at being like ethical and having really great practices. But like, you know, it's no secret that the fashion industry is like the second largest polluter in the whole world. And so I was like, well, I don't think like the fashion industry in that sense is like for me. And so I had this like existential crisis where I was like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go on like other job interviews and I'm gonna see if I feel inspired, if something really is kind of like, you know, gonna like reignite me again. Cause I was like kind of starting to like dwindle down in terms of like my inspiration in life. And so I went on like different job interviews and like nothing really stuck with me. It's not them, it's probably just me. It's just something that I just don't want to work in. And I had this like, I was starting to have an existential crisis where I was like, okay, I don't know what I want to do with my life then. I mean, it kind of sounds a little bit dramatic, but like that's what was going on where I was like, wow, you know, I went to college, I got this degree in something that I'm realizing like I don't want to do. And that's like, that makes you feel horrible because I mean, college in the United States is absurdly expensive. And so the idea of completely abandoning it and doing something else is like absurd. But what is more absurd? Like being completely unhappy the rest of your life, or just saying like, I got a college education and it is what it is. So my boyfriend, well, yeah, at the time, my boyfriend, who was French, he was just like, you know what, like, why don't you just like come live in Paris? And like, that's like a very, if you kind of like think about it, and the way it sounds now, like it sounds like really ridiculous. It sounds like kind of like a crazy idea. Just like, oh yeah, like let me just drop my whole entire life in New York City and let me like move to France. And on one hand, it sounds amazing, and the other hand, it sounds like completely impossible and terrifying. And I'm no stranger to moving, so I was like, you know what? Let me just like give this a try. Like maybe I'll move to France and well, actually, like first I said, okay, like I'm gonna move to France and I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then I had this like aha moment where I was like, you know what? Maybe I can work in wine. And it's like, I have no background in it. I have no professional experience. But I'm learning so much. I'm super passionate about this. I'm super passionate about what I've learned. And I'm so enthusiastic about wanting to like learn more, connect with others so I can teach them about it. Like directly connecting with people and to teach them and to learn more and to visit winemakers and to go to tastings and be so much more like closely involved in the wine world sounded like a dream. And so I was like, you know what? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to move down to Florida for like 6 or 7 months. I'm going to find a job there so that I can save up my money without having to like pay like insane amount of rent and bills like in New York City. So I did like, you know, what a lot of people do is I moved back home. And so I was like in Florida for 6 months. I had a marketing job at a creative agency that, you know, like let me save money for the move. And while I was in Florida, I basically enrolled in the WSET, which is the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, which is basically like the largest and most well-known like wine school or wine program you can be a part of. And I hesitated between that and the Court of Master Sommeliers, and I ended up choosing that because the Court of Master Sommeliers, A, is like super expensive. It's super rigorous, and it's definitely catered more to someone who wants to be like a traditional sommelier, like on the floor. And that's not at all what I wanted to do. What I wanted is just to have a really nice, like general, broad understanding of wine. And that gave it to me. And so I spent the next 6 months in Florida doing my marketing job full time, working at the wine bar part time, and then going to wine school and taking my exams just so I could move to France and see where this takes me. And so while I was in Florida, I did that and I graduated. And then in like September of, wait, when was it? In September of 2018, yeah. No. In September of 2017, oh my God. Wow. Yeah, in September of 2017, I moved to France. And so the next part of this video is me talking about me actually getting to France, getting my work visa, and starting to work in the wine industry here, which is like kind of a crazy story how it all like came to fruition and happened. And so if you want to hear more about that, I would stick around because there's going to be a part 2 soon. But thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you soon. Bye.